They laughed when she called it cheap metal right there under the courthouse's buzzing fluorescent lights. Names Earl Madsen, 76, retired mechanic, and that worn dog tag. It's older than most of the folks judging me. Funny how a $5 trinket can silence a whole room. Or not. Ever been misjudged just for what you wear? At 6:45 every morning, Earl Madsen took his seat by the frosted window at Daisy's diner, quiet, predictable, forgotten by most. The booth creaked as he settled in its cushion, permanently indented by the years of repetition. He removed his cap, set it gently beside his coffee cup, and nodded once toward the counter. Miss Daisy had already set the eggs over medium on the grill. Dry toast would follow, then black coffee in a chipped ceramic mug, older than most patrons. The diner was half awake, same as always. A soft gospel tune murmured from the radio behind the pie display. The scent of cinnamon rolls rose above the sharper tang of lemon oil, which Daisy used with quiet diligence, polishing the counter like it might reveal a memory. Outside, leaves danced along the sidewalk, yellow and burnt orange, and the first breath of winter nipped the corners of the windows. Daisy often told customers with a knowing glance, "He watches like he's guarding a perimeter," never guessing how close she was to the truth. Earl didn't watch for danger, not anymore. But he noticed things, the rhythm of a spoon clink the change in a man's gait. The shadow that passed the window at the wrong time of morning. Some instincts once earned stayed carved in the bone. He wore the same jacket every day, the green of it long since faded to dust-colored olive. The left sleeve bore the ghost of a patch removed years ago. Around his neck a tin tag swung gently. As he lifted his coffee, a dog tag, unadorned but dented by decades. He never spoke of it. Few asked. Deputy Owen came through the door at 7:15 sharp, nodding toward Earl as he passed the window table. "Morning," he said, a man of few words. Earl answered with a slight incline of his head, acknowledgement without need for conversation. The two weren't friends in the usual sense, never shared beers or birthdays, but they recognized something in each other. The quiet weight of service and the unspoken agreement to leave the past in its place. Daisy wiped down the sugar shakers. "Tomatoes in my yard froze solid last night," she said brightly. "I knew I should have picked 'em sooner, but you know how hope gets in the way." "Frost's early this year," Earl replied, voice like weathered wood, worn but steady. Then he returned to his meal, cutting eggs with mechanical precision. He never lingered. By 7:32, his plate was clean, napkin folded. From his inner coat pocket, he drew a folded court notice. He read it once more, eyes lingering at the signature. The expression on his face didn't change, but he held it a moment longer than needed, as if weighing not just the paper, but something beneath it. Then he tucked it away. He left $2.75 beside the plate, exactly 15% tip, like always, and rose with the careful dignity of a man who believed in structure. The street outside was quieter now. The postman's truck had rumbled off, and school buses had done their rounds. A breeze chased dry leaves into the gutter, as Earl walked, boots brushing the sidewalk, in a rhythm older than most things in Franklin Springs. Veterans Day banners hung from lampposts, their edges curling, the print slightly faded, "Honor." "Remember, serve." At the courthouse steps, Earl paused. A woman in a pantsuit brushed past him without eye contact. He adjusted his collar, the tin tag slipping cold against his skin, and climbed the concrete stairs with slow, deliberate steps. A dog barked again. From 2 blocks away, the same pattern as earlier, sharp, then short, then silence. Inside the courthouse smelled of wax and paper. The floors gleamed under 2 bright lights, and a hum came from somewhere above, a vent or old wiring maybe. A young woman at the front desk glanced up, her manicured fingers paused above the keyboard. "Can I help you?" she asked, tone brisk. I have a hearing, Earl said. Name Earl Madsen. She began typing, frowning as she did. The keyboard clicks echoed in the sterile space. Not seeing you. She squinted at the screen. You have any kind of paperwork? Earl reached into his pocket, offered the notice without comment. She read it, pursing her lips. What kind of ID do you have? Earl pulled gently at the cord around his neck, revealing the dog tag. He held it up like a worn passport. The woman, Carrie, her badge red, tilted her head. That people buy those online now. Doesn't prove anything. Earl met her gaze evenly. He didn't blink. She sighed and tapped again. What's the case land title? Briar Ridge. Been mine since '75. She didn't hide the skepticism in her expression. That long, huh? She looked him over, boots, jacket, gray stubble, then smirked faintly. Interesting timing. You bring anything real? He didn't move. Didn't flinch. Her chair creaked as she leaned back. Let's see if that story works in front of the judge. Inside the courthouse, Earl's silence stands out more than the chatter around him. He sat still on a wooden bench near the check-in desk, hands folded, gaze resting not on anyone in particular, but somewhere further beyond the layers of walls and time. People came and went, voices murmuring about licenses, fines, and filings. No one seemed to notice him. Or rather, they noticed him like one notices a light switch or a clock, something to glance at, not truly see. Carrie Dillard tapped her keyboard aggressively, annoyed by the blinking cursor that seemed to mock her. She hated disorganization, and this old man Earl didn't seem to grasp the basics of identification or protocol. She'd checked twice now and still couldn't find a matching record under his name. The dog tag he offered lay between them on the desk, catching the flicker of fluorescent lights overhead. You're telling me this is your proof? She asked, arms crossed. Earl gave a slow nod, neither defiant nor apologetic. His expression didn't change, but there was a faint tiredness in the way his shoulders held themselves. He didn't explain. He didn't argue. He simply waited. A few feet away, behind a half-wall partition, Deputy Owen watched the exchange. He wasn't assigned to the desk today, but something about the tone Carrie used and the way Earl didn't respond kept him rooted. He leaned just enough to see the desk arms folded, saying nothing. Carrie clicked again, then rolled her chair back with a sigh. Your file's not in the digital archive. There's nothing under your name for that parcel on Briar Ridge. No tax ID, no updated grant papers. Earl reached into his coat and retrieved a folded document, yellowed at the corners. He laid it gently on the desk. She unfolded it, scanning with narrowed eyes. This is from 1975. She scoffed. This can't be valid anymore. He didn't reply. Carrie reached for the dog tag, lifting it between two fingers like it might burn her. This trinket doesn't tell me who you are. It tells me you didn't bring a real ID. A man across the room leaned toward another, whispering behind a raised newspaper. That's Earl Madsen, isn't it? From Maple Avenue, Carrie didn't hear it. Or if she did, she ignored it. She dropped the dog tag onto the counter. It landed with a dull, metallic clink, the sound louder than it should have been in the room full of soft voices and shifting papers. This doesn't prove anything, she said, her voice a bit too loud, a bit too final. Earl's eyes didn't move. He stood still, calm in a way that unnerved her. Behind the partition, Owen's jaw tightened. He stepped forward without a word. His boots didn't echo, but his presence did. Carrie turned as he approached, the look in his eyes not hostile but clear, focused. He didn't address her. He picked up the dog tag, carefully read the lettering in silence. The metal was worn, edges smoothed, but the etching remained clear. His thumb brushed over the name Earl J. Madsen. His lips moved silently as he read the rest, Hugh City 1st Battalion. Carrie looked between them, her confidence suddenly unsure. What she asked defensively. You recognize that Deputy Owen didn't respond right away. His eyes stayed on the tag, and something in his face shifted, subtle but unmistakable. His breath caught, and he blinked once slowly. Then he turned the tag over in his palm like it was something sacred. From across the room, the old man who had whispered before said quietly, "Fools forget what real sacrifice looks like." Carrie turned toward the voice, then back to Earl. His stillness now felt heavier, not passive, but grounded, like someone who had stood in storms and simply chosen not to move anymore. Carrie's thoughts whirled, a flicker of doubt sliding under her skin. Had she misread him? Was she missing something everyone else already saw? She crossed her arms again, more for comfort than authority. "Look, I still need documentation," she said, but her voice lacked the earlier bite. Something more official. Owen didn't answer her. He didn't hand the tag back either. Instead, he kept it in his palm, his brow furrowed in thought, as if some distant memory had been called forward. The courthouse buzz continued, keys, typing papers, rustling names being called out from behind doors. But in that corner between the man who said little and the officer who suddenly had a lot to consider, something quiet and important shifted. Deputy Owen silently picked up the tag and read it to himself, expression unreadable. Judge Blake's footsteps echoed across the courtroom floor, but it was the dog tag that stopped him in place. He had just stepped through the side door behind the bench when he noticed Deputy Owen standing quietly beside the front table, a thin chain of metal dangling from his hand. The air in the courtroom already still seemed to thicken. Sunlight streamed in through the high windows, catching the glint of that tag, making it shimmer faintly like something unearthed from a war museum. Carrie Dillard stood to the side, arms folded tight across her chest. She didn't meet Owen's eyes or Earl's. She merely held out a manila folder and muttered, "He says this makes him somebody," her voice flat, defensive. Blake walked slowly to the bench, every step deliberate, the gavel in his hand, heavy in ways that had nothing to do with weight. He sat, adjusted his glasses, and glanced down at the docket before him. "Earl Madsen," he said, clearing his throat. Earl stood posture upright, though age tugged at his shoulders. "Yes, sir." Blake studied the older man, something faint flickering behind his eyes. He glanced toward Carrie. "Ms. Dillard, I understand you have doubts about this gentleman's identification." She nodded stiffly. "The paperwork is decades old. No clear record in our system, and..." He presented a military dog tag as proof. Deputy Owen stepped forward, placing the tag gently on the table in front of the judge. No words, just that single gesture. Blake picked it up. His hand trembled, not from age, but something else deeper. He turned it over, reading quietly, "Earl J. Madsen, Hugh City, 1st Battalion." His breath caught. The courtroom held still. He removed his glasses slowly, deliberately. His fingers touched the bridge of his nose, then rested on the edge of the table. When he spoke, it was more to himself than the room. "My brother, your unit Earl didn't blink. I pulled him out. He didn't make it." The judge's hands tightened slightly, then released. He exhaled through his nose, long and controlled. "He was just 19, he whispered. Earl nodded once, his eyes distant. "The jungle never asked how old we were." A silence followed that wasn't awkward but sacred. Even the courthouse clerk, known for her perpetual typing, had stopped mid-keystroke. The reporter in the back lowered his pen. Judge Blake stood. The room did not expect it. Neither did Carrie. He stood tall behind the bench, and with a movement both crisp and heartfelt, raised his right hand in a formal salute. The kind not taught in training manuals, but earned in fire and loss. His palm hovered in front of his brow, unwavering. Earl did not move. He didn't return the salute, he received it. For a long moment, nothing else existed but that gesture. And then the judge lowered his arm, placed both palms on the edge of the bench, and looked directly at Carrie. This man doesn't need to prove who he is. We do. The words fell like a stone into still water, rippling through every corner of the room. Carrie's pen slipped from her hand and clattered to the floor. She bent to pick it up, but stayed low a moment longer than needed, as if catching her breath. Owen straightened beside her, his shoulders rising in silent solidarity. Behind them, an elderly man with a VFW pin on his lapel wiped at his eyes without shame. Earl didn't speak again. He simply folded his hands behind his back and looked out the window to where the American flag waved gently in the November air. For the first time in decades, Earl spoke about the war not in anger or pride, but in memory. The room hadn't emptied after the judge's declaration. If anything, it had grown fuller. Word had spread like smoke through a dry town. By mid-morning, the old courtroom benches groaned under the weight of townspeople, many of them, with silver hair, folded flags, or the kind of stillness that hinted at shared understanding. The courthouse flag outside fluttered gently in the fall breeze. Inside, the air held its own quiet reverence, broken only by the hum of the old ceiling fans and the occasional shuffle of feet. Judge Blake had not resumed the hearing. Instead, he had risen from his seat and walked to the side of the room, motioning to Earl without formality. "Would you tell us?" he asked, voice just above a whisper. Was it Hugh City Earl's face did not change, but he nodded once slowly and stepped forward until he stood not at the defense table, but in the very center of the courtroom. He didn't look up to the gallery or down to the floor. He looked somewhere far beyond both. It was February. 71. We'd been out in the rubble near the Citadel walls for 3 days. No cover. Just the smell of smoke, cordite, and sweat. He paused. We were supposed to rotate out. Then the mortars started again. A few in the room drew breath, but no one interrupted. I was point that night. Heard the call over radio, 2 down, maybe more, pinned in a narrow alley south of Fushuan Bridge. I disobeyed orders and went back. Found 2 men alive. One of them was Private Blake. The judge's fingers gripped the wooden railing, though he said nothing. He'd taken a hit to the abdomen. I dragged him into a doorway. It was raining, always was it seemed. I took off my jacket, pressed it to his side, tried to keep him awake. Earl's voice didn't break, but it softened. He talked about his brother, said he wanted to be like him, said he wanted to play trumpet again. Judge Blake shut his eyes. I stayed with him, called in med-evac 3 times. None came. He died before sunrise. I kept his tag, carried it through 2 more stations, turned it in at Da Nang before flying out. Earl exhaled long and steady. I never told anyone. Some things you carry alone. A deep silence followed, not heavy but honoring. A veteran near the back sniffed quietly, wiping his cheek with a wrinkled hand. Another seated near the aisle bowed his head and removed his cap. Carrie stood still at the side, her posture less rigid than before. She looked at Earl differently now, less like a clerk defending a file, more like a human learning to listen. Her lips parted slightly as if to say something, but she said nothing at all. Deputy Owen rested one hand casually on the wooden balustrade, watching her. His stance, protective but not stern, spoke volumes. There was no judgment in his eyes, only quiet expectation. Earl, meanwhile, turned his gaze to the judge once more. He was brave, sir, all the way through. Blake stepped forward. He didn't bother to disguise the emotion in his face. You honored him more than we ever knew. Earl looked down at his boots. The judge's eyes moved, then landing squarely on Carrie. Some people wear stories, Miss Dillard, he said, his voice low but firm. Others live them. Carrie flinched, not with guilt, but humility. Her gaze dropped, and for the first time since she had arrived in Franklin Springs, she looked small. Not weak, just no longer armored. The flags outside shifted again, catching a patch of sunlight, their movements slow and solemn. Inside the courtroom, nobody moved. Nobody needed to. The town that once looked past Earl now couldn't look away. The hallway outside courtroom 2B buzzed with the murmurs of a town awakening. Word had traveled faster than any headline. Someone said the judge had stood up and saluted. Someone else said the old man with the tin tag had saved a Blake boy in Hugh. Facts blurred with feeling, but the story had roots now planted and growing. Carrie Dillard stood near the bench, her hands lightly clasped. The usual tightness around her shoulders had slackened, replaced by something uncertain, almost shy. She hadn't said a word since the judge's rebuke. She'd only watched Earl from a distance, as if learning a new language she once thought she spoke fluently. Deputy Owen stepped beside her, his presence steady but unassuming. He didn't look at her immediately, just let the silence between them settle before he spoke. You know I served right, Carrie blinked, then turned slightly. No. I didn't. Owen's voice remained calm, but there was a weight beneath it. Desert Storm. 91. Guys like Earl, he trained men like me. Men better than me. He saved people like me. Carrie's breath caught in her throat. I didn't mean I know, Owen said gently. But you didn't ask. The door behind them creaked as it opened. One by one, the hallway filled with townspeople. Not just curious onlookers, but veterans in faded jackets. Widows with pins on their lapels. Teenagers carrying folded flags, unsure why they'd come, but sensing it mattered. Daisy arrived quietly, her apron still dusted with flour. She nodded at Owen and made her way into the courtroom without a word, her steps unhurried but purposeful. Inside, the atmosphere had shifted entirely. It was no longer a hearing, it was a reckoning of presence. Judge Blake returned to the bench, clearing his throat. We'll resume briefly. Carrie took her seat, hands shaking slightly, as she sorted the papers she no longer needed. Blake tapped the folder once. Per our records and per a grant filed in 1975 with county approval, this property was never revoked. This case should never have been scheduled. Murmurs swept the room. Some gasped. Others nodded, knowing now what they hadn't known before. Carrie stood. Her heels echoed faintly as she walked the short distance to Earl's table. She stopped just beside him, extending her hand. In it lay the same tag she had once dismissed, now resting on her open palm with care. I'm sorry, she said. I didn't know. Earl didn't reach for it immediately. He met her eyes not with bitterness but clarity. You didn't ask. She nodded, accepting the weight of it. Earl took the tag, slowly curling his fingers around it with practiced gentleness. Judge Blake rose again. He stepped down from the bench, crossing the room toward Earl. They shook hands, not as strangers or judge and defendant, but as men who shared something unspoken, sacred. One by one, the veterans in the room stood. No command was given. No signal exchanged. just an old rhythm among those who understood. They saluted, some with sharp precision, others with trembling hands, but each one facing Earl, honoring not just the man, but the silence he had carried for so long. Daisy from the back watched with damp eyes. She leaned toward a nearby patron and whispered words meant for no microphone, no record, just truth. He never wanted this, she said. He just wanted breakfast. And still the town kept watching, no longer past him, but to him. Veterans Day came with soft wind, a new photo on the diner wall, and an old man in his corner booth. At exactly 6:45 a.m., Earl Madsen stepped into Daisy's diner, just as he had every morning for years. The soft chime above the door announced his entrance to a room already humming with the low, comforting murmur of a town slowly waking up. The wind had left its chill behind on the cuffs of his coat, and as he closed the door gently behind him, he paused for a moment to take in the familiar warmth. Outside, the world celebrated. Children walked past the diner windows waving small paper flags, red, white, and blue, drawn with crayon and glue. Teachers herded them gently toward school, their laughter and tiny footsteps echoing off the brick buildings of Franklin Springs. A banner across Main Street fluttered, "Honor Our Veterans, November 11th. Inside it smelled of coffee, maple syrup, and cinnamon rolls just pulled from the oven. The booth by the frosted window waited for him untouched. It always did. Daisy looked up from the counter where she'd been arranging slices of pie in the glass display. She didn't smile, her face simply lit up in that unspoken way of people who understand each other without words. "Morning, Sergeant," she said. Earl nodded, the corners of his mouth turning up slightly. "Morning, Miss Daisy." She poured coffee into a thick white mug and carried it over to his table with a plate. "Apple today. On the house, you didn't have to." "I did." She placed it down gently beside him along with a folded napkin. On the wall near the cash register, a new photo had been framed. It showed Earl standing tall in the courthouse, flanked by veterans in uniform, Judge Blake at his side. Underneath it, a small plaque read, "Honor doesn't speak loudly." The booth had gained a quiet reverence now. People no longer avoided looking in his direction. They glanced with subtle respect, the kind that needed no announcement. A woman walking past the window gave him a slight wave. A teen in a school hoodie slowed down to tip his head respectfully. The bell over the door rang again, and Carrie stepped in. Today she wore jeans, flannel, and a navy ball cap stitched with a patch Veteran Support Org volunteer. She held no clipboard, no badge, only a smile that had softened with understanding. "Mind if I sit?" she asked, motioning toward the seat across from him. Earl gestured without looking up. "Suit yourself." She slid into the booth, setting a canvas tote at her feet. "Signed up last week. Helping with care packages, winter drives, little things." He sipped his coffee. Little things matter. I learned that she said quieter now. Learned a lot. Their words hung in the warm air. She didn't fidget. She didn't apologize again. That had been done. Now came something better, presence. A small boy, no more than 8, wandered in behind a parent picking up a to-go order. He stared at the framed photo for a long moment, before turning toward Earl's booth. "Did you fight in a war?" the boy asked, voice full of innocent wonder. Earl looked at him, eyes steady. "I did." "Did it hurt?" "Only the parts I remember." The boy blinked, unsure what to say. Earl reached up and unhooked the dog tag from his neck. He held it out, palm open, as if offering a story too heavy for words. The boy approached carefully, taking the tag with both hands. He studied the faded letters, tracing them with his finger. "It's heavy," he said. Earl nodded. It's supposed to be. Carrie watched in silence. Behind the counter, Daisy turned her back and wiped at something that might have been a spill or her eyes. The boy handed the tag back. "Thank you," he whispered. Earl took it, looped it around his neck again, and tucked it beneath his collar. "Any time," he said. The boy left, turning once to wave. They sat for a while after that, the sun rising higher. Outside, flags danced gently in the breeze. Inside, the diner buzzed with soft conversation forks on china laughter, carried over steaming mugs. Deputy Owen dropped in, tipping his hat toward the booth, and Earl raised his coffee in a silent toast. No words passed between them, but meaning did. As Carrie stood to leave, she looked down at the empty plate, the folded napkin, the quiet dignity of a man who had asked for nothing, but had given everything. As the morning passed, more people came and went, some pausing at the photo, others leaving folded bills under empty coffee cups as quiet tribute. The town didn't throw parades for Earl Madsen. It didn't carve his name into granite. But on this day, it remembered. A teenage girl left a hand-drawn thank you card at the edge of his table, cheeks flushed as she hurried out. Earl didn't move to read it. He simply looked out the window again. The sun was higher now, and it caught the edge of the glass, throwing a soft glow across the old man's hands. Hands that had built fences, patched roofs, and once pulled brothers through fire. Daisy brought him a refill, no words needed. She glanced once at the photo, then at the booth, and smiled through the shimmer in her eyes. Franklin Springs never built a statue for Earl Madsen. They just left his booth open. Sometimes the quietest corner holds the loudest echoes of a life well lived. Earl never asked to be noticed, yet when his truth surfaced, it gently rewrote how a town saw dignity, service, and kindness. Real compassion doesn't wear a label or demand recognition. It simply shows up again and again in the smallest, most human ways. Like a warm booth on a cold morning, goodness waits patient and unassuming. If this story stirred something in your heart, consider passing that warmth along. After all, kindness isn't what we say. It's the seat we leave open for someone who needs it most.